this review we're looking at a crane model from NZG. It comes in a colourful box and it's the Linkbelt 175AT. There's a couple of details about the real crane on the front, and on the back there's some details about the model. And it lists out all of the main features. Looking underneath the box we see the NZG logo, and this is NZG model number 1012. Opening the box we find the usual pair of expanded polystyrene trays, and there's some paperwork which we will look at shortly. Helpfully the trays are marked top and bottom so we don't accidentally open it up in Australian mode. And as you can see it's factory sealed, so we need to get the knife out and cut the tape. Lifting the lid we can see that all the parts are well wrapped. Let's look at the paperwork, and the first sheet contains a list of all of the parts that are in the box. And that's always a helpful inclusion with any model. Also included is a 2-page leaflet, and this describes the main features of the model. It's all helpfully described in pictures, and it tells you how to deal with the various parts. The only thing missing is any kind of reeving diagram. On the back, the leaflet explains the puzzle that catches some people out, and that is to fully retract the boom you've got to fully open it up first, and then retract it from the top down. In the box there are a number of parts. One thing to note is that out of the box the axles in the boom head are tied together, and that's because they are loose and can be popped out. One small detail to be aware of are these tiny parts on the boom. They are easily dislodged and need to be glued back, and there's a spare in the parts bag. For the initial assembly we'll put the crane in road-going mode, and so we'd better give the driver some mirrors. These are of the press-in variety, and they stay in, but they will be easily knocked out. Out of the box the counterweight is fully loaded, so we need to remove it to get the axle weights down for road use. As usual the rope on the drum is taped for shipping, so you need to peel that off, and actually if you really want to reduce the axle weights, the last piece of the counterweight is also removable. There are 2 clips to remove, and then you can gently ease it off. However, we'll keep that rear plate on, and then just add the counterweight tray into the middle of the carrier deck, where it positions itself properly. Next we'll need to take rope off of the 2 winch drums, and pull the ends forward to the boom head. So here is one we prepared earlier with the hooks reeved up. The big hook block isn't too difficult to reeve up, and you just need to watch that the axles in the boom head don't slide out sideways. Here the hooks are attached to the loop at the front for transport. Next we have the lattice fly jib, and that's an easy fit, it just slides into position, and you don't need to pin it, it stays where you put it. To complete this part of the assembly we need to add the beacon lights, and they slot into the holes which give the access to the counterweight attachment mechanism. With that done, if you've got suitable trucks you can produce a full transport configuration. We start by looking underneath the crane, and the structure is nicely modelled. The transmission system is nicely modelled, and on this crane the axles 1, 2, 4 and 5 are all driven. And this all-terrain crane has nice wheels and tyres. The cab detailing is sharp with nice lights and very thin windscreen wipers. And the mirrors and step all look good compared to the real crane. There's a Linkbelt sign in the windscreen. While we're here, the 2 hooks are metal and they're nice pieces. The detailing of the wheels looks very good compared to the real crane's aluminium wheels. And there are other pleasing details such as small warning signs. And there are some rubberized skirts above the wheels. The boom has got a nice big cable drum on it. Moving on to the crane cab, and the standard of detailing is high, although the crab rails are plastic, not metal. There's some very nice detailing on the crane body, including small graphics. At the back of the carrier the lights are detailed, and more tiny graphics give the model an authentic look. In transport mode, the link belt name is visible on the back of the crane, and hydraulic cables can be seen around the winches. The lattice fly jib is a high quality metal part, with the luffing cylinder jackets being plastic with a reasonable colour match. The outriggers are made of metal components. The piston is smooth and the small graphics add detail. The counterweight slabs are all separate pieces and they are decorated with chevron graphics, and all of the slabs have usable lifting lugs. The rope used on the model is good quality. Behind the driving cab there are some very good looking mesh grills, and other details such as the highlighted panel latches are high quality. The carrier deck is also well detailed, although there are no access ladders because on the real crane they're stored under a flap. Here's another view of the crane cab, and some of the finer details are really good, including the very thin windscreen wipers. The main boom ram is actually a plastic part, and we'll talk more about that soon. Back underneath the carrier and each of the axles has independent steering, and they also each have very good sprung suspension. Let's look at the crane out on the Cranes Etc. Superhighway, and the model moves well enough in a straight line, although you need some downward pressure to make sure all of the wheels are grounded. If you like a bit of rock and roll, you can see the suspension works well, and the steering means that you can replicate all of the modes of the real crane. So we can start with some crab steering, and that gives us a nice kind of sideways shift. For low speed travel on site, you can engage all axles for very tight turns, or for travelling in the next speed range up, you can lock axles 3 and 4, or for high speed travel on highways, you can run with steering just on axles 1 and 2. Talking of high speed, we've now arrived on site, so we'll begin to set up by pulling out the 2-stage outrigger beams. And you lower the pads by unscrewing in the usual way. No spreader plates are included with this model, but there's enough range of movement to be able to get the crane wheels free. Next we can move the hand railing on the crane body to working mode, and using the giant hands of the crane assistant, we'll unhook the 2 hooks at the front of the crane. Next, as the excitement builds, we can raise our boom. And the first thing to note is that it requires some effort because there is stiffness in the boom ram. In one sense it's an older style because the jacket is a stiff plastic, but it also represents a more modern style with a grub screw being used to lock a position. However, the way it's really intended is that the locking is only done at certain extensions, with the piston being indented. The system works, but it's not as successful as a metal ram jacket. The full counterweight can be stacked on the carrier deck, but the unusual design of this counterweight means that you can't really rotate the crane over it to pick up the counterweight. So in the model world we really need the assistance of giant hand cranes to lift up the counterweight and offer it up underneath. The counterweight clips on to the bottom of the screwed pistons in a sideways movement. And then once that's done, you wind up the pistons using the supplied Allen key, and that then clamps and firmly holds the counterweight in place. You extend the telescope in the normal way, and you can see the first section is very thin because of the material used. There are link belt graphics on the first section, and it's best to have some weights on the hook when you do this. Each telescope section has 2 locking points at around 50% and 100%. And to move a section beyond the locking point, you press in the clip, and it's spring-loaded inside the section. And then you can extend the section and the clip pops out at the next locking point. Both of the winches are operated using a supplied key, and they have a positive action spring brake. So if you want to play crane driver, the brakes on the winch drums will hold a decent load. One thing you can use to keep a load on the hook is this link belt plate. It's metal with good quality chains and it hangs well from either hook. Another feature on the model is the tilting cab. The angle's not huge, but then it's only 20 degrees on the real crane. The next option we can look at is using the fly jib. To get the maximum length, we swing it open and you secure it in position using tiny brass nuts and bolts. Now of course these are too small to use by anybody with salami fingers, so special tools are included. The variety of configurations of the fly jib is really good. If you want, you could just have a very short stub jib and the pulleys are there for that. Or you don't have to use the swing away section, you can run a hook from there. Or of course go full length. Fixing the fly jib to the boom head is straightforward enough. Just bear in mind the axles in the boom head are loose and you need to line them up. And then you make the fixing with the nuts and bolts. Another nice feature on the fly jib is that you can alter the angle. The hydraulic rams are quite stiff and so it will hold any pose that you set. This is quite a tall crane model, so let's get the tape out and do a dim check. And to the top of the main boom it's about 46 inches or 116 centimeters. With the maximum fly jib you get 57 inches or about 146 centimeters. NZG has produced a high quality model of this link belt crane. It has a high metal content and very nice details. Most of the functionality works very well, with just the main boom ram not being the best. Overall, there's enough quality in this model for it to be considered excellent.